Hi, thanks for tuning in again to this next installment of Infinite Implications. In the first section, I told you the story about the primary inspiration for my ideas, Dr. David Deutsch. I told you that humans have reached the infinite and that problems will always be occurring and so will solutions to these problems that we can solve. One of those persistent problems has been, and surely will be, suffering, something we psychologists know a lot about. And one sure reason for a great deal of human suffering has been that there is not enough to go around, that there has always been haves and have-nots, those with more and those with less. As we probably all learned in school, there's a branch of study and theory called economics that's interested in, among many other things, studying how stuff gets moved and kept or lost by people. Economics studies how actual physical resources and materials get moved around and distributed among people, but it also studies money, which is, in simple form, a symbol for stuff. Clearly, this is a very overly simple way of saying it, and I'm not trying to offend economists. It's just what we need to know for the purpose of what comes next. Which is that one of the central beliefs or principles of economics has always been that there is a limited supply of actual physical stuff. That is, said a bit more technically, resources are finite, and the demand for goods and services is often more than the supply. That is, there are more people who want more of the resources than they can have, because resources are limited. And this central truth works no matter what kind of economic system you're using. Here in the US, we're currently trying capitalism, but we might all have heard about socialism and communism, or even barter or feudalism as other examples. All of them agree that supplies are limited, and you have to find a way to distribute the limited supplies somehow. But there's a new idea that comes from the recognition that humans have reached the beginning of infinity. Resources are not finite. Let me repeat that. Resources are not finite. And though it's not fair to say resources are infinite, primarily because the universe as we now understand it has its own limits, even though that belief could change too, resources do have the potential to be, as far as I'm concerned, essentially unlimited. That should surprise or shock you. Resources unlimited? How can that be? After all, we only have the Earth to work with, and we all know that has limits. Let's try to see a few ways that can help challenge that. Our sun is, again for practical purposes, a source of unlimited energy. The sun provides not only solar, but also wind and water power, since rain and weather arise from changes in temperature and the amount of sunlight. And from the moon we get tidal energy, the 2-time daily movement of the near land ocean. With that energy, we can make or transform matter into pretty much most of what we want. It's true that right now we don't know how to harness all the energy of the sun, or even most of it, but we could. We could, because we're universal problem solvers, and because we understand the laws of physics, and we know that it can be done. And there may be other forms of energy that are essentially infinite, such as geothermal, the energy from the Earth's interior, background radiation, energy from the universe not originating from our sun, or maybe even our own controlled fusion sources. Fusion is what makes the sun work, and though for now we can't control it, someday, perhaps soon, it looks like we will be able to. Fusion provides two possible options: the release of enormous amounts of energy and the creation of new raw elements to be used for fundamental raw material, for stuff. And perhaps there are other forms of energy not yet discovered. After all, the possibilities are infinite, as noted in the first installment of the Implications of Infinity. So with essentially infinite energy, we can create infinite materials and meet at least the basic needs and desires of all people. And if we choose, we can meet the needs of all the other creatures on Earth that we are now essentially shepherds for. In sum, having infinite energy will create a new set of problems to be solved. We recall, problems are infinite, but with it, we can at least greatly reduce the basic suffering of food, clothing, shelter, and safety for all people. But someone might object, there are limits, such as on human activity. People, because we're contained in a fragile sort of shell, and because we have limited lifespans and limited time in a day, we have limits on what we can do. So this is not an infinite resource. But we're fortunate that at least part of an answer to this problem has been being created for hundreds of years. Automatons, robots, and artificial intelligence all can serve as infinite sources. They can help us make the material goods people need. They can perform tasks humans can't, such as mining deep space for raw materials, working in environments intolerable to humans, say deep inside the earth mining energy, or working on repetitive tasks. And they do so now, but they can do so even more. And for those who worry that robots and AI are dangerous, let's remember, progress is infinite, and with progress comes new problems that have to be solved. But it is a mistake to stop progress because problems will arise, and fears about robots taking over are plain out misguided. All robots are artificial intelligence start with one premise. They are programmed by humans. While they may indeed evolve, they are by their initial programming incapable of surpassing their makers. For a simple analogy, consider the fundamental idea of a god. The concept is that such a being or an idea is a creator. We may strive to be like the creator, but we can never surpass the creator. This is fundamentally true with robots and AI as well. So indeed, there are both unlimited supplies of both goods and services. A fundamental rule of economics is shown not to hold up if and when conditions change. This doesn't render economics useless, of course. There are still infinite problems for economics to study. Of course, simply saying what's been said above doesn't make this happen. A fundamental shift in thinking is needed. We've been limited by the idea that our world is finite. It isn't. The change can and will come in human beings' desire and imagination as we realize that we've reached the beginning of infinity and our options are limitless, as are our problems. We know that science fiction has played with the idea of a society beyond the issues of limited supply. Star Trek did it, but that world had no explanation for how this happened. With infinite economics, it seems to me we have a clear and very possible way for the future. Thanks for tuning in.